From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
I'm Jennifer Cutting, Folklife Specialist at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. It's September 20th, 2018, and we're here interviewing some of our artists from tonight's Homegrown Series Archive Challenge Sampler Concert that's taking place tonight at 7:30 in the Coolidge Auditorium. And we have with us the group that's going to be first up in the concert, the Ships Company Chantymen. And we only have two of the Chantymen. We'll talk about the others later, but with us right now is the business manager of Ships Company Chantymen, Myron Peterson. We also have Folklife specialist and writer-editor from the American Folklife Center, Steve Winick, who's going to guest tonight with Ships Company. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I guess the first question I had for you, Myron, is I understand that Ships Company Chantymen is part of a larger organization called Ships Company. And I was wondering if you could tell us what the relationship is between Ships Company Chantymen and Ships Company, the larger organization, and how Ships Company Chantymen came to be.
Ships Company Incorporated is a nonprofit organization incorporated in the state of Maryland, and we do historic presentations and centered around the life of the sailor from the early wars period, the American Revolution, predominantly now the War of 1812, and also for the American Civil War. And this started about 35 years ago on doing programs on the Constellation in Baltimore. And at that time, the ship was considered the original 1797 frigate. We know now that that is not the case. It's a rebuild from the 1850s. And so the ship did see service during the American Civil War, so the group decided to expand out into Civil War. And for a while that almost became the primary focus, but there were a number of us who really enjoyed the early wars period. And as the bicentennial of the War of 1812 approached, we got a much better research and understanding of the Navy of the War of 1812, building on what it was during the American Revolution, during the Quasi-War with France, during the First Tripolitan War. In between shows on Constellation, in the early days when we were still doing Quasi-War, some of us would spend the time between our doing gun drill, which was the predominant show, just singing to entertain ourselves, and it was decided, hey, we actually don't sound too bad, and so a small group of that got together. We shanghaied, Navy term, a few other people from the folk community, notably Casey King, who had been a member of the boarding party.
Oh, yes.
And formed the Ships Company Chantymen in 1996. So, and we started, the usual, we'll do this for fun and exposure, and now, we do this for money. We're mercenaries.
Okay. And what kind of repertoire do you focus on?
We focus on nautical songs. We like songs with a relationship to sailing, the sea, and they can be modern, so we can go into steam and diesel as well. We don't mind. But that we like that relationship between the sailors and the song. Now, some of it is a tavern song from the early periods. You'll see that occasionally where we're singing what was popular, because sea shanties, as we understand it, mostly evolved in the later part of the 19th century. There are very, very few shanties from the very early periods. Shanty is used to coordinate work on board ship. On Navy ships especially, they didn't like them because the first command in the Navy is silence. So you've got to be able to hear commands, and they had manpower. The merchant ships, on the other hand, didn't have the manpower, a lot of people, so they had to coordinate the work more, and hence the shantymen and
I see.
thieves.
Now, I understand that you were in the Navy for over 20 years yourself.
That's correct.
What was your position?
I was a Russian interpreter for the Navy. I was trained by the Navy and attained the rank of Chief Petty Officer. I retired in 1996, so just before the Chantymen started, so I was a little more free with my time. Before that, I was deploying at the will of the Navy on board various ships, a lot of submarines.
I was wondering was music part of your daily life in any way while you were in the Navy?
Not particularly, although on one or two trips there would be people who would get together. Somebody would have a guitar and they'd sing, and it was a way to pass the time, especially when you're working. In my case, working 12 hours with 12 hours off every day, but there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
So singing, like I said, but it was very rare. Most everybody, the music involved, especially later part, of a set of headsets and a tape.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, moving over to Steve now, I know that you did most of the research for tonight's performance, which is convenient because you work in the American Folklife Center. Tell me a little about the collections you used and why you chose the songs that you did.
All right, I'll say first off that I am the writer and editor in the American Folklife Center here at the Library of Congress, but I'm also a longtime member of Ships Company Chantymen. I've been kind of on the inactive list for a while, so I haven't been doing a lot of gigs with the group, but I have been a member of the group for over 10 years now, I guess. Because of that, when this idea came up to have the Chantymen in the Archive Challenge, it sort of made sense because I was kind of the inside guy, right? I already worked here and I knew the collections. So the question was, what would be the best songs for us to do? Two of them come from the James Madison Carpenter collection, and that's partly because that collection has been getting more attention lately because it's been digitized by the American Folklife Center and placed online at the Ralph Vaughan Williams Memorial Library in England, which is part of the English Folk Dance and Song Society. And so during that process of them putting it online and us getting them the digital files, we were all kind of working with the collection somewhat. And so I became familiar with some of the pieces in there, and they were really interesting pieces. Carpenter was an American who collected both in the US and in Britain in the late 20s and early 30s, which is kind of an underrepresented time in folklore collecting. And the two songs that I chose, one is a very interesting version of Blow the Man Down, which is a well-known sea shanty that everyone does in the sea shanty scene, but it's a completely different version than anyone else ever does, because Carpenter was very interested in sea shanties and in fact wrote his doctoral dissertation on nautical songs. But his professor that he was writing this doctoral dissertation for was George Lyman Kittredge, who was the student of Francis James Child, who was the preeminent ballad scholar of the 19th century, after whom we even have a category of ballads named. So we all talk about the child ballads in folklore circles. And so what Carpenter discovered was that one of these versions of Blow the Man Down has lyrics of the verses that are a child ballad. A child ballad was actually adapted into a version of Blow the Man Down. And this interested him so much, he collected it 3 times actually, twice in New York and once in Wales. And so that was one that I thought stood out from the collection for all those reasons. Partly because everyone would be somewhat familiar with it, but not familiar at all with this version.
And you have blended verses from different field recordings to create the version that you're going to perform tonight.
Yes, in fact, this was early in Carpenter's career, and he mostly collected this one in writing as opposed to on cylinders. And so we have written texts and transcriptions of it. But yeah,
and it looks like they were all collected in 1928.
Yes, interestingly enough. And that kind of shows you that it might have been a sort of micro era in that shanty's life when this version existed, and it kind of faded quickly. These 3 men, certainly 2 of them knew each other because they were both
They were both at Sailor's Snug Harbor.
Exactly, which is a sailor's rest home in Staten Island, New York. And it's quite possible that they knew the third guy as well, because these crews were often international.
And the other guy was Richard Warner from Cardiff,
from
in
Cardiff
South Wales.
in South Wales, right. So yeah, I combined some verses from all of them. Primarily, I'm doing a version that he recorded from Dennis O'Connor's in Sailor Snug Harbor, but I put in a couple of verses from others.
Okay, we've got 3 more songs to cover in 5 minutes, so yeah, let's go ahead and talk about On Board the Bridget and the other song from the Carpenter collection.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too. Which Carpenter, as I said, he wrote his dissertation on sea music, and so when we were going through his collection, there are some items that we have notebooks with tunes written down, but we don't have the words for those tunes. And it turns out that this is one of those. So I found the tune in his collection, but then when looking at his doctoral dissertation, I found that the words are in there. So we were able to match those up together. And I was actually alerted to this by our friend Bob Walzer, who's been working with the collection quite a bit. And it appealed to me because it's a song that tells the story of a fishing trip from Massachusetts up to Atlantic Canada, and I've heard the tune up in Atlantic Canada. It's still in oral tradition, but not with these words. So I thought that was an interesting piece as well, and we put that one together.
So this is a great reunion.
Yeah, exactly.
The reunion of the tune and the words. Now let's jump to William Derflinger's collection of Patrick Taylor. From that collection, you chose Reuben Rando.
Yeah, and that's only because, I mean, Taylor was an incredible singer and chantyman, but also a great storyteller. And he gave these incredible introductions for some of his songs, including Reuben Rando. So we decided we'd play a piece of his introduction.
Using that tonight.
So we'll hear Taylor's voice introducing the song, and then Myron's actually going to sing that one. But it's another very well-known sea shanty, which is about a tailor who goes to sea. Sailors often made fun of tailors, and a lot of people did in those days. Tailors had the kind of stereotypical reputation of being wimps. That's sort of the joke that is always being told about tailors in that era.
And over to Jolly Roving Tar from the Anne and Frank Warner collection.
So that is a song, again, that all nautical groups know. It's very well known in this community. But what nobody knows, or very few people know, is that everybody knows that song because of a single field recording that's in our archive. And that was a recording made by Anne and Frank Warner of Lena-born fish in East Jaffrey, New Hampshire in 1940. Yeah. So when I learned that that was the case, and I learned that actually from Jeff and Garrett Warner, who were here just a few weeks ago, I thought, wow, that would be a great 4th song to do in our set, and we put that one together as well.
And did Ships Company already sing a version of Jolly Roving Tar?
Yes, that's one that's in our general repertoire.
In your
already.
repertoire.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing being that you probably learned it from someone who learned it from someone else who learned it from the Lena-born fish.
Yeah,
The field recording
so
of Lena-born fish.
The way that worked was that the Warners were good friends with the Lomaxes, and they played this field recording for the Lomaxes, who put it in one of their books. And so a transcription of this was released in a book. And so it was then learned by a lot of people in the folk revival. But another thing that none of those people knew, the Lomaxes didn't know it, the Warners didn't know it, and Lena-born fish didn't know it. She had learned it from a retired whaling sailor. But none of these people knew that it was actually a stage song that was written by Ned Harrigan of Harrigan and Hart fame. But he wasn't written with Hart, it was written with his father-in-law, a man named Dave Brom. And they wrote it for a play called Old Lavender, which was on Broadway. And it was, it became popular not only with, everyday popular culture, but it became popular with sailors. And so it went to sea and was then collected from sailors by Lena-born fish, among other people. And so it's a great story of one of those kind of dramatic songs about sailing life that actually caught on with sailors, and that wasn't uncommon.
And made its way into the oral tradition.
Right, that wasn't uncommon. That did happen quite a bit in the tradition. So,
well, we're looking forward to hearing all of these 4 songs tonight in the Archive Challenge Sampler Concert from the Homegrown Concert Series in the American Folklife Center in the Coolidge Auditorium tonight at 7:30. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us for this interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.